So let's take an individual business capability and walk through the intellectual capital assets that are required to support it. This is going to give us the starting point for our balance sheet for our capability. So in order to set up our audit context, we need to define the assets that are important to a capability. So you should choose those assets to audit based on their value to the capability. In other words, we might have 8 categories of assets that are required to support a capability from in the perspective of Andreessen's model, but we might not, first of all, we might not be able to audit all of those, and they have to select one type of asset to audit. So consider the value of the capability and then the value of the asset to supporting the capability. So we're going to take an operational capability from our university on a page to walk through. Of the 8 categories of assets, which ones, I'd like you to think about which ones would be the most important to the successful performance of this capability as we go along. We're going to keep a running list as we decompose the capability and look at all the assets, and then in the end, we're going to look at the full set of assets, intellectual capital assets that would be required to support that capability. So the capability we've chosen is provide a top undergraduate education. So we might break this top capability, this capability here, down into develop a top quality curriculum, recruit top quality faculty to teach the curriculum, recruit a motivated student population, and provide a productive learning environment. Those might be some core components of that capability. So we need to start out by defining each capability. What do we mean by develop a top quality curriculum? Well, curriculum is developed through professional processes. It's aligned with domain expectations. It's designed to suit the profession, and it reflects current knowledge in the field. Recruiting top quality faculty means that the university realizes its faculty are its primary source of intellectual capital. It recruits and retains top faculty, and the faculty maintain their expertise and are top teachers and learners. Recruiting a motivated student population, the university recruits a student population who engages in learning and also contributes to the learning of others. We also would want to provide a productive learning environment. In this case, the university provides an effective and modern learning environment which leverages state-of-the-art forms of instructional design, the expertise of instructional designers, and appropriate technologies. So let's now walk through the different kinds of intellectual capital assets that would support those 4 sub-capabilities. So let's remember Andreessen's intellectual capital asset model, which focuses on human capital, structural capital, and relational capital. By human capital, we mean aggregated tacit knowledge and skills, the attitudes of all the people who support that capability. By structural capability, we mean the general culture that surrounds that capability, its procedural knowledge, and its explicit knowledge. By relational capital, we mean the communication, knowledge, and social networks that support the capability as well as the capability's overall reputation and brand. So we're interested in identifying the specific knowledge assets or intellectual capital assets for each capability and in each category. So we will find that all 3 types of capital mentioned by Andreessen are needed to support those sub-capabilities to really achieve the business goal. Some of these assets are intangible in that they are human characteristics. Some are tangible or fixed in that they're actual static physical representations of recorded information, such as published journal articles or books. But remember that the intellectual capital assets are always associated with people, with communities or groups, and with organizations. They are not physical capital, and they are not financial capital. They're associated with people, communities or groups, and with the organization. So let's look at providing a top quality curriculum. Who is the source of the curriculum? Who is the source of the, what are the assets that are needed to support this? Well, I would say that the faculty, the colleges or schools at the university, and the libraries are probably the primary sources of assets. It intellectual capital assets here. What do we mean by tacit knowledge? Well, we would have to have the subject matter knowledge of the faculty, a knowledge of curriculum design, learning resources, knowledge of the general domain, and knowledge of current trends in the domain. So it's not just book knowledge, but it's experiential knowledge, and knowledge of current trends. The skills that are required. Obviously, we have to have some teaching experience. We have to be able to evaluate feedback, because that's what we use to improve the curriculum or to keep it up to date. In terms of attitude, we need knowledge-sharing attitudes. We need attitudes that are oriented towards open access and continuous learning, situational learning. In terms of explicit knowledge, we need final syllabi. We need the informational resources that they reference. We need access to commercial databases, to assignment design, curriculum guidelines and standards. All of these they may have a tangible form, but they represent significant intellectual capital assets. Procedural knowledge for this subcapability would primarily be curriculum development processes, issues of encroachment policies at universities. Culture, teaching philosophy, learning culture of the institution, reward and recognition systems in the classroom, mentoring and coaching culture. In terms of networks, we need to have knowledge of other thought leaders in the field. We want to provide citations to the work of others. We need to have teams of teachers who are perhaps teaching the same courses, and we need to have networks within that particular subject domain. Reputation, I think we want a rigorous and comprehensive curriculum. We also want to have regular peer review processes. So those are all the intellectual capital assets that our faculty, our colleges, the libraries would have to contribute in order to have a top quality curriculum. In order to recruit top quality faculty, obviously here are the source of our intellectual capital assets are our faculty, our instructors, our adjunct faculty, and our administrators. We see many of the same kinds of intellectual capital assets here, although there is a bit more emphasis in, say, tacit knowledge and situational knowledge, narrative intelligence, social intelligence, emotional intelligence, all things that go into the development of mature and effective faculty members. In terms of skills, again, we need knowledge of teaching methods, experience, technical capabilities, course management, application skills. In terms of attitude, the most important attitudes of faculty, I think, are mentoring, coaching, engagement, self-learning, critical thinking, self-reflection, and review. In terms of explicit knowledge, we would have publications, credentials, teaching experience, research experience. Procedural knowledge, faculty need to have knowledge of teaching protocols. They need to have subject area know-how, knowledge of teaching ethics, teaching models. The cultural issues here are faculty must be collaborative. They must prefer little risk in order to advance the area of knowledge that they work in. They also need to be community-oriented. The faculty member sitting in an ivory tower in an office who doesn't communicate with other colleagues or students is not likely to contribute to undergraduate education at a university. Networks, very important again for faculty, extensive internal networks, external networks, and visible college participation. Reputation would be teaching reputation, student evaluation, collegial evaluation, peer review. Our third subcapability, recruit a motivated student community, has a little bit different set of intellectual capital assets. We want our students to have some rudimentary knowledge of their chosen course of study that we can build upon. skills, they need technical skills, they need different kinds of literacy. They need communication skills, emotional intelligence, social intelligence. In terms of attitude, we would want them to have an eagerness to learn, a willingness to work in teams. It would be great if they were pro-learning versus pro-grade in their attitudes. Their explicit knowledge would consist of assignments, projects, their personal libraries. Procedural knowledge, they need to know how to learn, how to study, how to succeed in the education environment. They need to understand educational ethics, how to behave in the educational environment. Culture here would be a little bit of a risk-preferring attitude, open-mindedness, open to experimentation, and open to different types of learning experiences. Their networks are a little different. Their networks include family, social networks, college and school community, and any spiritual support networks they might be bringing. Reputation for them includes evaluations, teacher evaluation, the instructor evaluations of students, grades, feedback, etc. All right, and our fourth sub-capability is to provide the productive learning environment for students. This includes an additional set of intellectual capital assets because the sources are a little bit different. Of course, we have the faculty, but we also have instructional designers and technology. So in terms of tacit knowledge, we're including knowledge of instructional methods, assignment design, teaching experience. In terms of skills, we would include technical skills, very strong organizational skills, narrative intelligence, coaching and mentoring skills. This is not just for students, but also instructional designers providing that support to faculty. Attitude here, a little bit different, some overlap, adaptability, the ability to envision how something might work, what the environment might look like. Creativity is very important here. Explicit knowledge would be successfully developed courses, models for online learning, knowledge of online learning design principles and guidelines. Procedural knowledge would include course delivery, assignment, evaluation, and feedback processes. Just overall knowledge of course delivery, I think, and design are critical here. Cultural assets here would be a strong student-faculty community culture, a culture of fair rewards and recognition. The networks here become a little bit more complex. We have student to faculty, faculty to family, student to family, and student social networks. Reputation, here we have student feedback, student evaluation of the course environment, and course design peer reviews. So this is a fairly rich set of intellectual capital assets that we need to support these capabilities. If we were to combine them across all of those four capabilities, in other words, all the intellectual capital assets that are needed to support the provision of a strong undergraduate education experience, we would find a very rich set. If we look at tacit knowledge, we're looking at subject matter knowledge, curriculum design knowledge, learning resources, knowledge of specific domains, knowledge of current trends, subject matter. We have a little bit of a redundancy in subject matter expertise, which seems to be a very strong asset. Situational knowledge, narrative intelligence, social intelligence, emotional intelligence, some knowledge of the course of study, kind of at the other end of the scale from subject matter expertise, instructional methods, assignment design, teaching experience. So if we looked across all of these intellectual capital asset categories, we get a sense of a very rich set of assets, I believe. And looking at procedural knowledge, I think if looking at culture as well, the attitude towards teaching, an orientation to learning culture, reward and recognition in the classroom, mentoring and coaching culture, collaboration, risk-preferring, community-oriented. What's really interesting is that all of those intellectual capital assets are actually attributes of people or communities. So one of the challenges we have when we're auditing assets is that we're not just counting reports in a filing cabinet. We're not just counting books on the shelf. We're actually assessing attributes of individuals, of groups, and of organizations, whether they are. So this becomes a bit of a challenge because we have to draw from other disciplines in order to understand what is the emotional intelligence of a particular faculty member, what is the emotional intelligence of a student, what is the knowledge and instructional design models and methods of someone who's being hired into that position. So assessing intellectual capital becomes quite a complex exercise. Okay, so we've walked through one of many business capabilities for a university. This is just one of, it's a sub-capability of all of those operational or core capabilities. We've taken a very cursory approach to identifying the intellectual capital assets that support that capability. What we found, I think, is that most of these are attributes of people, of groups, and of organizations. So I'd like you to just step back and share your thoughts and reactions to what we have just surfaced. So how critical do you think intellectual capital is to achieving this business capability? And I'd like you to also comment on how we normally think about capital assets and what it means when we're only focusing on financial and physical or tangible assets, and when we're not considering the intellectual capital assets of an organization. Provide a top undergraduate education. So we might break this top capability, this capability here, down into develop a top quality curriculum, recruit top quality faculty to teach the curriculum, recruit a motivated student population, and provide a productive learning. Most important to the successful performance of this capability as we go along. We're going to keep a running list as we decompose the capability and look at all the assets, and then in the end, we're going to look at the full set of assets, the intellectual capital assets that would be required to support that capability. So the capability we've chosen is, so let's take an individual business capability and walk through the intellectual capital assets that are required to support it. This is going to give us the starting point for a balance sheet for our capability. So in order to set up our audit context, we need to define the one type of asset to audit. So consider the value of the capability and then the value of the asset to supporting the capability. So we're going to take an operational capability from our university audit page to walk through. Of the 8 categories of assets, which ones, I'd like you to think about which ones would be the more assets that are important to a capability. So you should choose those assets to audit based on their value to the capability. In other words, we might have 8 categories of assets that are required to support a capability from the perspective of Andreessen's model, but we might not, first of all, we might not be able to audit all of those, and they have to select